So I just finished watching the second season of Sprint, which came out a few days ago, about a week ago, and I just wanted to give some quick thoughts on the season this time around. But this won't be an in-depth breakdown, more just my overall personal thoughts and some highlights as well as some missed opportunities in the season. But do check out Stadius Mad Podcast for a full episode-by-episode breakdown of season 2 from Chris and Preet. They got you with all that there. But some initial context. I actually came in not thinking very highly of season 2. Like most track fans, I read the comments, the tweets, right, the posts on IG. Most of the commentary was pretty negative for the most part. So this also happened after season 1, but for some reason, I was more inclined to believe that this season was really not that great. Again, just based on the commentary that I was seeing. But what were my initial thoughts? Just my personal opinion after watching, I thought season 2 was actually really great. And at the end, I'm probably going to speak to, give a little bit of argument as to why I appreciated season 2 a little bit more than season 1. But there seemed to be more highlights than lowlights for me, again, just during this season. So first off, some of the highlights. The inclusion of Julien Alfred's story was amazing. I love that they highlighted her growing up with nothing in St. Lucia, her journey to meeting Coach Flo at the University of Texas, and then going on to win her country's first ever Olympic medals. Despite us track fans knowing Julien, this was a big introduction to kind of complement her Olympic 100-meter gold, and it was well deserved considering she is very reserved, humble, and not as open as other athletes. I also love that Coach Flo was included here, and we got even more of his personality and the support that he always provides to Julien. To me, it's hard for someone to not be a fan of Julien Alfred after watching this season. Now, number 2, the addition of Letsile Tebogo, Seville, Kishane Thompson, and Kenny Bednarek. Very, very huge here and really great to me. And not only their additions, but the fact that they went into their backstories, I really appreciated that. These are all, relatively young and newer guys on the scene, with Kenny probably being the most experienced. He was only 25 years old throughout the entire season. But all these guys, they're relatively reserved in terms of their personality. So introducing them to a slightly wider audience with the Netflix documentary here, knowing that they'll be competing for years to come, is a very positive addition. Number 3, Fred Kerley getting more camera time this season was very, very smart. 2024 was a pretty pivotal year for Fred, as he was one of the main players in the 100-meter dash, especially considering everything that transpired. And in season 1 of Sprint, he barely got much shine. But now, being able to see some of his struggles, as well as the aftermath and appreciation that he showed after winning a second Olympic medal, this was huge and definitely a great addition. Fourth, Melissa Jefferson and TT Terry being included was a massive positive. I really feel like in the track and field community, both Melissa and TT are kind of like fan favorites. So to have both of them included and spotlighted here was great. I really think it allowed them to also build a better connection for fans that I don't think was really captured in the first season, which is the depth and the talent that exists in Star Athletics Group, right, coached by Dennis Mitchell. And think about it. They could have easily just cut TT Terry out since she didn't actually win an individual medal at the Olympics this year. So really glad that they included both TT Terry as well as Melissa Jefferson this season. Number 5, we also got to see Christian Coleman this time around. Even though he didn't make the Olympic team, even though he didn't have the greatest of seasons, it did show a bit of his story and progression up to the trials, which was a great addition. And even more so, I like that they kind of contextualized him being the last active 100-meter guy to not only have competed with, but also beat Bolt in the 100-meter dash all the way back in Worlds in 2017. Now, for number 6, this continued focus on the coaches is something that I love to see. This really takes you inside the connection, the relationship that all the coaches and the athletes have. This was probably my favorite part of season 1, so I love that they continued with that in season 2 here. You had Coach Flo, Lance Brahman, Stephen and Paul Francis from Jamaica, Tanja Buford-Bailey, and a little bit of Coach Dose, who works with Tebogo. But also you had Coach Dennis Mitchell. Dennis Mitchell, of course, had a bunch of athletes featured, but there was a part of me that felt like Dennis was really a connection to bring the story together for the sprints as a whole. Number 7, they didn't focus too much on the times again, which, similar to season 1, I thought was absolutely great. I barely even thought about the times, and I really just focused on the competition. Looking back, I really only thought about the times maybe 2 or 3 times, and I really don't remember it much after that. You had Kishane when he ran 9.77 at Jamaican Trials. There was a part when they were talking about Noah running a personal best throughout the season, and there's maybe one other time, but I can't really remember. And even though there was a close Olympic 100-meter final, it felt less about the specific time and more about just how competitive that individual race was between Noah, Kishane, Fred, and of course the rest of the field. But finally, number 8. Though Noah and Gabby, they of course were the focus, when I'm kind of thinking back, I personally didn't feel like they overshadowed, the rest of the story to me, right? I actually remember the stories and the focus on Julien, the Jamaican men, Tebogo, Melissa, Kenny, and all the other new faces in this season more than I actually remember Noah and Gabby. I don't know if that's because they were also the focus of season 1, so I already knew that it was coming, or maybe, I don't know, it is a negative that they maybe needed to do a better job of actually highlighting Noah and Gabby. I don't know, maybe they needed to make it more compelling. Or if this was the intended goal, right? Maybe they actually wanted to make sure the other athletes could be focused on. But overall, I saw it as a positive, and I came away getting a better picture of all the athletes' stories as opposed to just Noah, Gabby, and the top names there. Granted, I will say there was a lot of Noah in episode 1, and the covert story at the end of the 200 after that, I don't know, it seemed really forced and maybe not too compelling, the way that they kind of played that out. But regardless of all that, that's a lot of positives. But before I get into those negatives, again, I came into season 2 having read a lot of the criticism online, and while watching, I low-key kind of felt like I was almost trying to find parts about the show to not like. And of course, that's not a great way to watch something, but as time went by, as I kept watching, it really felt harder and harder to criticize for the most part. I really appreciated the highlights that I noted above, but of course, there's a ton of things that they definitely could improve upon. So here's some of the negatives, some of the things that I didn't like. First off, they could have introduced Kenny and Letsile much earlier in the story. Both of them ran the 100-meter final, and at least part of their stories could have been contextualized a bit earlier. For example, one of my favorite scenes is when Kenny finished 7th in the 100-meter final in Paris and gets to the practice track, reaches Dennis Mitchell, and he's extremely emotional and crying on Dennis while Dennis is trying to motivate him. That's such a powerful scene. Again, one of my favorite scenes, but the problem was there's literally no context of who Kenny was or even the fact that he was a prominent figure in the sprints, of course, the 100-meter dash here. Looking back at the Olympic trials in the 100, they literally only focused on Noah and Fred. Again, understandable, but they didn't even highlight Kenny making the team in second place, right, ahead of Fred. On top of that, they literally didn't even show the 200 meters at the Olympic trials. So there was no Noah, there was no Kenny. You didn't know that they both made the team. So by the time you got to the 100 and Kenny crying with Dennis, you have no idea why it was even emotional and what it took for him to make the 100-meter Olympic final. And add to that, with Letsile, there was a huge opportunity to introduce him much, much earlier. They could have easily given him a setup with the context of him winning the 100-meter silver at the World Championships last year and then losing his mother in the middle of the 2024 season. They could have then used that to explain him failing to make the 100-meter podium at the Olympic Games and then going on right into the redemption story of going for the 200-meter gold to make his mother proud after the 100-meter failure. To me, I don't know, that's an easy layup since they literally told his story after the fact, right? The story was there. I don't know, it was just a strange omission to then only introduce him in the last half of the last episode, which unfortunately seemed kind of rushed to me. But after that, the New York City Grand Prix. This was another missed opportunity to contextualize specifically Fred Kerley's story. Of course, they show the false start and figuring out what happened, but it wasn't really clear that Fred had a relatively subpar start to the season, and New York City was literally the last meet before the US Olympic trials. And they didn't even need to go into the kind of intricate details of the ASICS sponsorship, right? Him wearing Puma spikes and kind of all that controversy. That nuance, that's for us as like the diehard fans and really probably unnecessary context for a casual viewer. But again, that was, in my opinion, another easy layup to just talk about the stakes of that last meet before trials when Fred was arguably, I don't know, a coin flip in terms of making the team based on what had happened in 2023 and then of course the first half of 2024. But building off that, I kind of had an issue on how they contextualized Shericka Jackson and her struggles throughout the season. I will actually give some props that they were able to get a bit down and in depth with Shericka throughout the year and even got her on the practice track walking off while the official is calling her name for the Olympic 200-meter heats, right? That was a pretty fire moment. That was actually another one of my favorite moments from the season. But it was kind of strange how they didn't talk about her struggles at all up until the Olympics. And again, this could have been an easy layup for Netflix. Think about it. Early in the year, she struggled to get going and even lost a 200-meter race right before the Olympic trials in Oslo at the Oslo Diamond League. That could have been played up as a question on would she be able to be ready to qualify for the Olympic team? Then, even remember at trials, I think she actually lost her 100-meter semifinals, and then in that actual final, she was behind Tia Clayton as well as Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce up to 50 meters in that race. race, that could have easily been played up as a comeback victory to qualify for the Olympic Games. Then after that, it would provide at least a bit of context as to why she pulled out of the 100 and the 200 in Paris. And again, for us diehard fans, we know that she, pulled up in the Hungary Continental Tour. We know some of the, intricate details and things like that. But I'm not even mad at them for admitting something like that. I just think that there was very, very, very little context around her season being more of a struggle than it actually seemed. Last season, they did it with Marcel Jacobs, right? They spoke about his injuries. They showed him getting treatment and all those kinds of things. They could have done it with Sha'Carri this year. But Jamaican Trials, I don't know, it turned into this strange competition about trying to make the team specifically ahead of Shelly-Ann, which we know was not really the case. Like, it just wasn't the case. But last thing, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, my last negative. There was no context around her leading up to the trials. Absolutely none. Now, I know they didn't get to actually interview her for this season and probably didn't get much footage. All the interviews that you saw, those were old videos and actually were carried over from 2023 when they spoke with her. But there should have been at least some mention of her being in kind of questionable form, dealing with injuries, entering the trials. And she only ran that one race like 2 weeks before trials. Something about that should have been mentioned. And again, you don't have to get too in-depth with some of those specific details like the times and all that, but I don't know, I saw that as a massive missed opportunity to tell the story of Shelly almost not making the team at her last Olympic Games. And sure, there's a ton of other things that I could have spoken about, like the 4x1 at the end really not being too useful. I don't know, that was a weird part of the story. I don't know, it fell flat for me there. Or even the whole thing about Shelly actually pulling out of the 100-meter semis, right? And it really not being explained. But when I look back, I understand why they make certain decisions. And I think that last part on Shelly especially, that further highlights how much of a challenge it is to get access and to tell the stories that they want. For example, you can tell they wanted more on Shelly, but they had to go with what they got and probably couldn't get a full understanding of why she didn't run in the semis, or maybe she even told them explicitly that she didn't want anything about that to be included, so it's not public. Who knows? Same with Sha'Carri, right? She gave access, really great access leading up to the Olympics, and I appreciated her kind of opening up in the lead up to the games, but then I could only imagine the devastation of being injured in Paris, possibly leading her to not wanting to continue with, a post-Olympic interview. Also, they obviously wanted to highlight Sha'Carri, but she probably did decline to be part of the season. But with her absence, I actually feel like they kind of filled in the void, especially with the inclusion of, Melissa Jefferson, TT Terry, and then of course, even Dennis Mitchell. He played a very, very pivotal role, like I noted above. But then on the flip side, Marcel was clearly open to speaking with them since they could have easily just cut him out altogether, as really he didn't play a truly pivotal role this year outside of being the defending Olympic champion. But also, think about Oblique Seville. He didn't even medal, yet still was included, and I don't know, he could have declined after the devastation in Paris. So I kind of understand how they have to make certain decisions about their production after the fact when certain athletes are either going to give them access or decline access, depending on what actually happens. But overall, in my personal opinion, season 2, it was pretty great. I thought it was maybe not as great as season 1, but I think the combination of the 2 seasons was probably really good for casual fans. I also think season 1 being the first documentary that Netflix put on about the sprints, and the fact that it came out literally in the middle of the track season, literally it was just a few days after both the Olympic trials for the United States and for Jamaica. That gave us a completely different feeling. And all due respect to cross country, but nothing much is going on right now in the track and field world. And we're not on the edges of our seats getting ready to see athletes run at the Olympics, literally the biggest meet of the year for the sport. So it's a different time period. Season 1 came out at a very, very good time. Season 2, its release, maybe not the perfect timing. And although I still think that season 1 was a little bit better, I actually really do appreciate season 2 a little bit more, specifically because of how they were able to include so many athletes who not only had successes here, but are also on the rise and have some compelling stories to be told. Kishane Thompson, Oblique Seville, Julien Alfred, Kenny Benarek, Melissa Jefferson, and all the other names that were part of it. And remember, this is more for casual fans and not die-hard track and field fans like us who know every little intricate aspect of the sport. We'll never be fully pleased with a documentary like this, right? Yes, I want people like a Brittany Brown and a Connie Simbine, Marie-José Talu Smith, right? Ariane Knighton, and a bunch of other stories. I want them to be told. And we're going to want all the details of all the meets to be shown to provide that full context. But that's just not how things are going to work when trying to present things to the wider public who barely knows much about the sport in general. let alone those specific details. Believe me, my favorite event is a triple jump. I'm literally never going to be satisfied with how the sport is presented on a whole. But I really do suggest that even with all the criticism, all the talk online, as with season 1, you definitely need to check out season 2 and just judge it for yourself. So go in the comments, let me know what you thought about Sprint. Let me know if you love it, if you hate it, if you feel like it was just pretty good, if it was okay. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.